What was your official name when you were born?
Well, it was Annie Muriel Bowen.
All right.
Muriel.
All right.
You've heard of Muriel Cigars?
Yeah.
I don't know where they heard that at, but
Yeah.
it really was a pretty name.
Yeah.
And so from there on, they called me Annie Muriel.
Not your favorite name.
No.
Tell me let's see, where were you born?
I was born at Bellfall, or Janae.
Janae, at that
There
home place out there?
on the old farm, yeah.
Yeah.
And my memory, I guess, starts about when I was probably 4 years old. Really kind of about things that stand out in my mind is the music that we had. Mama's family was real musical, and she played the piano, and Uncle Joe played the violin. Her Aunt Agnes's husband, and another uncle played a guitar, and there was a French harp, and just my life was fun.
What was it like around y'all's house? If I'd walked up to the house back then, what did it look like?
Here's what it looked like. You haven't seen a picture that I painted of it?
I have, yeah, and I've been to that house back in the 50s
Okay.
when it was still
Well, when
there.
you came up to it, Marie and Helen and my mother had gone, and how in the world they ever got all those rocks, we call them, of the sea.
Kind of those fossils, like they were seashell
Yeah,
things.
the big ones.
Yeah.
And they carried those in there, and they made they called it the veranda, and they planted those all around there.
It was one of these, right?
Yes, this right here. And I suppose now they're probably back underground.
Get it for you.
But
Is
anyway,
that from the house? Is that one?
it was when you come into the driveway, come from the driveway, and it seemed like to me when I was a little kid from the main road, it was probably 3 miles. It was probably just a little piece, you know. But they done that, and they had plantings all around it. You saw that when you come in the driveway. And then the house had a large front porch on it. It was a one-story house. And coming up to the porch, you would see off to the right, there was an extension to that house where the kitchen was built on. So there was like a L shape there, and that's where our water well was. And you stepped out of the kitchen door and got our water there. And
So it wasn't like there was running water or anything like that?
no running water, no, honey. And Dad always had a wood pile. And they'd put watermelons in a bucket and put it down in there when the summertime would be so hot.
Cold.
Who shared the bedroom with you?
Helen.
Helen?
Yeah, Helen, I slept with Helen. Of course, you know, the first 3 children my folks had was Harold, Marie, and Helen. And then Helen was 10 years older than I. Well, Sonny was in there. Harold, Marie, Helen, Sonny, me, and Beatrice. And so
And Sonny was James, who was my dad.
Right.
Let me ask you right quick, why was he called Sonny?
he was such an impy, funny kid, kind of like Chance. Everybody loved him and called him Sonny Boy.
Okay.
I don't know just how that started, but we called him Sonny Boy. And as he got older, evidently they thought he needed his own room, and they built a room on that front porch.
Oh, wow.
I've thought about that. I wish I'd painted. I have the abstractor has a painting of our home out there in Linden, but the memory there when I was a little kid of cotton pickers and the colored folks that came out in those long cotton bags they pulled, and my poor dad would let me and I take turns and ride on that sack, and he would pick with them. And he would let us ride on the sack. You know, it was hard for him, but he let us do it. And I remember them weighing the cotton. And the thing that they put on there was called a pea. And they'd weigh it, and that was how the colored folks were paid, by poundage. And the cotton that they picked. I'm just going to hit on an instance like that I'm recalling.
Oh.
And I remember that there was always so much happiness and just foolishness and teasing and laughing and going on.
Yeah, since you didn't have a TV or you didn't even have electricity, no computers, whatever, how did y'all at night, I mean, you used kerosene lamps for light.
That's
at
right.
night. What did y'all do to entertain yourselves at night?
We read, believe it or not. Everybody read.
Next to a kerosene lamp?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And that's why I got the habit that I couldn't go to sleep at night without reading. My parents both read.
Uh-huh.
And I don't, of course, B came along later. I can't remember a whole lot about Sonny. But I know I just loved him so much because he was like my guardian angel, you know. And one of the things when I speak of him, I had never slept with him before. But one night, for some reason, I was a little girl, and I don't know how it'd been. And they had me in bed with Sonny.
Uh-huh.
And so went to sleep, and I guess he probably said, now lay still now, you know, you don't sleep. And middle of the night, I heard a squealing going on. And Dad used to bring in a little, especially a certain time of year, a little pig, you know, if it needed to in the house. And I started jumping out of the bed and I go, Dad's brought a little pig in here. And Sonny grabbed me and said, no, it's all right. He said, we'll see it in the morning. And I remember there was kind of something in his voice, and I knew I needed to lay back down. Well, next morning there was a baby there, and Louise was born there that night. And I remember that, and then I remember that wherever we lived, Dad always had a storm house. If there wasn't one there, he dug one, because he's afraid of storms. And Dad really was a weather watcher. And, I mean, it was for our security. And my mother would work so hard canning and trying to put up food for the winter. And this night, and she never wanted to go to the storm house, but she had to go. And this night, I remember Dad said, we got to go and a hurry. And I was crying and bawling, and I can't find my clothes. And he threw me a pair of his bib overalls. I don't know how I got in them. And we went to the storm house. Never would have any, you know, nothing ever happened, right? Well, when we got out of there next morning, well, the part of the kitchen had blown off. A tree had hit it. And so, you know, it was a good thing we weren't in the house. But that was one of the things Dad always done, had a storm house. He was afraid of storms, and therefore, I guess I'm afraid of them too. But I went to school at Janae's school, and we had to walk either around the road or through the pasture. We run through the pasture in cold weather, whatever, and there was a mean bull in there. So Dad would walk with B and I to school, and I remember doing that. And then, of course, in the evenings, we would walk back around the road, and it seems like, Jack, I can't remember. I've talked to B about it. I don't know. I had one. I love my teachers, and I was always the one, the impish one, that whatever she needed done to be calling him about, I could do it, get up and do it. And I was kind of really the teacher's favorite, I guess, because I danced when I was 5 years old. Big Carl Kraft, who came from Sweden with Grandpa, taught me the waltz. But anyway, that teacher gave me a doll. Really the only doll that I ever had, recall having. A little red-headed doll. And then there were just so many grades, and my mother realized that we were going to have to do something different, and things were not going real well on the farm. We had been through the Depression, the Depression really never touched us very much because we had all the wonderful food and the canned goods, and we had cream, milk. The only thing you had to buy was sugar and coffee, I think. Of course, there'd be the McNess man would come around for spices. And so probably when I was about maybe in the 4th grade, we moved to Temple and moved in an apartment with a woman by the name of Mrs. Duke. And poor old thing, there's something was wrong with her. She said, I hate to tell this. She sat on the front porch and clipped her head off, and she had no hair, had it all cut off. But the poor thing had something wrong with her head, and she said she had worms in her head.
Like ringworms, maybe?
I don't know. There wasn't nothing there.
Mm-hmm.
But there was something going on in her head, and she had imagined that she had worms in her head. But she would see her sitting on the front porch like this all the time. And, of course, my mother felt so sorry for her, and she'd see after her and things. But going to school, the city was entirely different. The city kids dressed different than we did. My mother we'd see a dress somewhere and she could cut a pattern out and sew it, but so oftentimes.
Be right quick. I want to move this microphone, then we'll put it right in the middle for a second. Just pause, hold that dot right where you were. And I'm going to set this under your glasses and hook it onto your glass.
Okay.
And that way when you gesture with your hand, well, it won't touch the mic.
Okay.
And your
Well,
mother
Careful,
would
Jack, when you're sitting in the chair because it squeaks a lot.
right. But your mother would sew using patterns.
Yeah, she'd make her own patterns out of newspapers.
Uh-huh.
And of course, I think we used a lot of the sacks that plow or whatever came in. They did. Everybody done that. But we had the relatives, the city relatives. They came out, and they loaded themselves up with chicken and whatever we had. My mother, butter and cream and milk and but anyway, back to school. It was real difficult for me because I was advanced from the 2nd grade to the 3rd grade because Maria and Helen had taught me everything, you know. And then when I went to school and the other kids dressed different than I did, and when you're young like that, it really affects kids.
Sure.
And I just couldn't, and a teacher never had time to even answer a question for you. So it was a real problem for me, and I went to school there until the 11th grade. And I got an infection, ingrown toenail, which I have one right now. And I'd not told my mother about it. And I was in the bathtub one day washing, taking my bath, and I washed underneath my foot. And a piece of that nail had gone down through my big toe. Scared the liver out of me. So I told her, and she said, we have to go to the doctor. Take you to the doctor. You got a terrible infection in there. And they operated on that toenail. And I never had such pain in my life. I couldn't stand up. And I was out of school for 2 weeks. And I said to my mother, I don't want to go back to school. She said, okay. Back then, it really didn't make any difference whether women, it wasn't that important to have an education, and like it would be today. And so I don't know, sometime about when I was 16 years old, I guess, maybe I was still in school, I worked in a drugstore across from Scotland Hospital. And there were 4 of us girls that worked in there after school. I was still going to school then. And we would, there was a bench across the street, and sometimes we'd go over there and sit there, and Now, as I look back, a really nice-looking young boy. I bet he wasn't over 18 or 19. It must have been a brain, because he was from New York, and he had come there to be a doctor. And I'll never forget. We just sat and talked and talked. Each day I'd go there, I'd end up over there. He'd be sitting on the bench, and I'd go talk to him. And one day he just reached over and he kissed me. And it shocked me, so I popped him, which I wish I hadn't have done. And it shocked him, I'll tell you, and I never saw him again, because he didn't feel like he'd really done anything. Another memory of that, working on that drugstore, why, on our days off, us four girls would go to that big swimming hole there by Belton. So we went swimming, and we stayed, and we got sunburned and so deathly sick, every one of us. So he fired us all. He said, you know, you should have known better, and I'm firing every one of you. So about 3 days later, he hired us back. But maybe it's a lesson to us.
Tell me, we're close to Christmas right now. What were Christmases like for your family
Awesome.
when you were a little girl or
They
young
were
girl?
just wonderful. I'll be so delighted to go back to it. We always knew that we'd go with Dad to the pasture and cut a tree.
Like the cedar tree?
Cedar trees, yes. And he always liked to get a big one. We did have 8-foot ceilings in our house, and we get one big enough we could put our star on it. And then we made all of our ornaments.
Like what kind of decorations did you put on it?
Well, we did have some the little ropes of green little ropes around it, but the other things were all handmade, just all kinds of little things we could cut out.
Did y'all
Even
do like popcorn and sew popcorn together?
Popcorn, and then even if you could find cigars, used to have that shiny gold things. We'd do those.
Little ring thing on it?
Yeah, and then we'd make the chains. Cut them out,
paper, gluing them together?
yes, and all those things. I really don't think we had much of any bought decorations back then. But I don't remember any special Christmas gifts.
Did you believe in Santa Claus?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe in Santa Claus. I was a little yippy kid too.
What'd you
and
get for presents?
I don't remember.
Now, Dad says he remembers that getting like a piece of fruit quite often, and maybe getting a whistle or something like that.
Surely we got something, I just can't remember. There was a special, was an orange or an apple or something like that. But as far as my growing up and feeling, I didn't get anything, I never had that feeling.
Yeah.
There was just overflowing of love in our family
Okay.
for each other. But as I say, there was some teasing and joking going on, but no one ever, offended, where other people were raised different. If you teased them like we did, that you were making fun of them. And always Dad would get up in the morning, he and my mother got up, fixed breakfast, and Dad had the music on. And
Was it like from the radio or a record player?
it was no radio that had batteries, those big batteries.
Uh-huh.
And things I remember, and I think so important that children might not see. My dad loved my mother so much, and he just couldn't hardly keep from touching her or something. And she worked so hard. And I remember she would go by him, and he'd jerk her down and sit on his lap. And I know she liked it now that, she go, Jim, let me alone. Let me alone. I've got to get this breakfast cooked. But now, knowing being a woman, I know that she liked it. And he was forever touching her or something. Yeah, so those are some good memories. And
Did y'all sing a lot?
Oh, my land. That was a lot of our entertainment.
Was it a part of Christmas, too?
No, every day.
Okay.
No.
What did you sing?
Well, we sang a lot of the religious songs.
Hymns?
Yeah. I've been hearing some of them lately that really brought back memories.
Like which ones?
Oh, golly. The Old Rugged Cross. Gosh, Jack, I don't know if I could name it.
I remember Grandpa liking to sing When the Roll is Called Up Yonder.
That was one of them.
Yeah.
And I always said, Daddy sang bass, and Mama would sing tenor. And it was really kind of like that. Yeah, and we don't have any of that in the churches anymore, those old songs that we sang, which is okay. But here the other day on TV, and I go, oh, golly, I remember, and I was singing those.
Now, I remember when I was a little kid that Grandma, did y'all have a piano then?
Mama had, I think probably when you were talking about piano, she had an organ originally. And by the way, Jack, that is her organ seat over there.
Okay.
So it would be over 100 years old.
Uh-huh.
I meant to bring that up to you. But she liked the piano seat and did get one finally. But I had a thought there and I lost it.
And she played by ear.
Oh, yeah, it was all.
Nobody had ever taught her how to play anything. Right.
And Annie had piano lessons, but Mama never did. And then Harold could play by ear.
Really?
Oh, yeah, Harold could just sit down and just play like
Right.
everything. But we done a lot of singing. It was so much fun. And B could never carry a tune. Bless her, and she don't know it, I guess, today. But she'll try to. And I used to could sing, I think, pretty well. I remember Sonny was here one day, and we had that recording, and I was singing. I want to hear what I sounded like, and I was singing, "Won't you come home, Bill Bailey?" I didn't know anybody was around, and he slept in here, and I go, "Oh my gosh, Jack, Sonny, I didn't know you was in here." And he goes, "Well, that's all right." He said, "You sound real good on there." But anyway, I guess.
Did you dance the whole time you were a teenager?
Oh my goodness, we had house dances, Linda, and what they do is clean out the whole one room. And I remember the chicken sandwiches. And yeah, we danced and danced. And no drinking. But as I think back, knowing Uncle Joe and Gus Kraft and them, they went out, of course, had to go outside the bathroom. I'll bet you they had a little nip out there maybe. But of course, I would be innocent. And I was always right in there dancing with them. And Helen and Marie told me after I was married, said, "Ian, I tell you," when I was skinny and long-legged, and said we'd say, "Come on, Annie Merle," said, do a jig for us. Somebody coming?
No.
And she said, I said, "I never done it." And she said, "You did. You just get out there when Uncle Joe and all them was there in the music, and you just jig, and your legs are just going this way and that." I said, "I know that's not true." "Well, it is, Ann. It's true." But just good memories, I guess.
Yeah. What do you remember about, especially for younger people in our family watching, what do you remember about, even above you, you're on the Kraft side, which was my Grandma Bowen's side, Ada Kraft was her name. What do you remember about her parents, your
My grandma and grandpa.
and grandmother on your mother's side?
Well, Grandpa, Mama's daddy came from Sweden and brought some nephews with him. And I think he probably might have been about 24 years old. Mm-hmm. And he married my grandmother when I think she was 16. And she was spoiled. And I remember loving Grandpa. He had a trunk, and he always had some candy for us. But I was only about 5 years old when he died. Excuse me. And I don't remember my fondness of my grandmother. She was a little snippy. Things that people don't realize how you can hurt children. But I always wanted to please. And I was down there, and I think it was like scarves, table scarves. And I remember thinking, "Grandma, I could iron those for you." I probably wasn't doing a very good job, but she came by, and I probably, because they ironed the towels and the men's underwear and everything back then.
Handkerchiefs.
Oh, everything, even your men's underwear. And she just grabbed the thing and grabbed it off of the ironing board, and she said, "If you can't do any better than that," she said, "you can't do it." It just broke my heart. And it seemed like I never really
Got over it.
never got over it. I just never really cared for her.
What on your dad's side, my grandfather's side, did you know any of his relatives above him, his dad or any of them?
Well, not very well.
Because his dad died in 1920 something. You weren't even old enough to know him, were you?
No. You see, he had, what, 3 wives?
Had a
You know,
bunch of wives.
Yes, they, I suppose,
They
all
kept
died in
dying.
childbirth.
Yeah.
Was what happened to women then. So my dad was the last of the family. And I remember Aunt Myrtle and Uncle Tom. And, well, that was just about it, I guess.
Yeah.
There was they called her Lizzie, and they lived in Marlin. And Uncle Jap Boyne, you met him maybe, I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah, Uncle
Sure.
Jap and his family. And my mother was a great bread maker. And Uncle Jap's wife died in childbirth. Real young.
Jap was your dad's brother.
Yes, Jasper was his name.
Mhm.
And Mama would, they didn't live too far, and my mother, of course, would bake and stuff for them. And they always loved Mama's rolls, and they'd say, Ada, we can smell them over there, and we need his bacon. They'd come over.
What did y'all, that's a good thing to bring up. What did y'all used to eat? What were your favorite things your mother used to make?
Brown beans
Okay.
and cornbread.
Mhm.
I love them to this day.
Right.
Of course, we had fried chicken, and we always had pork.
Okay.
But didn't butcher. Didn't butcher beefs. We had the cows that we milked and had cream, and could make ice cream and that kind of thing. But
You mentioned something your mother used to make called tea cakes.
yes,
What were they like?
they were delicious. Raymond has been in on those. And we've tried to copy, the girls have all tried to copy them. But she made them about this big. And then you just took a slit and put a little butter on them. And we've tried to copy that recipe, and some of the relatives have tried to give it to us, Marie. But we just couldn't ever quite perfect it. But I think what she done, she had cream and butter that she baked with then.
Mhm.
But everybody loved her tea cakes. And I don't know, Raymond would be there. I guess it was after we were married that he would be out working on his car, Dad's car, and Mom would be baking tea cakes, and we'd take tea cakes out to him.
Yeah.
That was their specialty, that and good hot rolls.
How old were you when you got married? When you and Ray married?
Well, I was 20 going on 21. My birthday was in August, and I was 20 years old, and I was 21 when my birthday came around. I was 20 years old.
Where did you meet him?
I met him in a nightclub, I guess it was.
In Temple or?
Mm-hmm. Yes, Mom and Dad, I was working, of course, and Mom and Dad lived out to edge of town at that time, and we had been into Temple shopping, and so I had an older friend that I liked so well, Eileen. And Mama said to me, "Would you like to go by and see Eileen?" And I said, "Yeah, I really would like to. I haven't seen her for a while." So of course my folks knew her, and we went by there and visited with her, and so Eileen said, "Why don't you spend the night with me?" Actually, most of the girls, Eileen was 10 years older than I was, but they didn't go with soldiers, you know. And I said, "Oh, you're going to the boy out to camp." I said, "He'll be in tonight." She said, "No, he can't come." She said, "He's got to do KP, so he won't be in." And I said, "Mama, I think I will stay with Eileen. Y'all come back and get me tomorrow." She said, "Yeah." So the boy come in. He got out of KP. And we went in. Do you have any idea, Raymond, what it was?
Oh, I think it was an unsealed dance they had.
Okay. So I went with them. And I don't know, there was this soldier over there. And I suppose we kept kind of looking at each other. And first thing you know, I probably made the move. I doubt Raymond did. I don't know. We got acquainted, got talking, and I really liked him and really was impressed with his manners and everything. And he wanted to know where I lived, and I told him, and he came out next day. And so I guess we went together some. And then he moved on. And then I met, well, I had just boys, you know, that you could go to dance with and things like that. We did that, but not any loving type thing, or they were just friends. I mean, boys will be boys, you know. And Raymond knows this story that I met this guy, and Sonny knew him in San Diego. He was 10 years older than I was. And he was a dancer. And of course Raymond was just a friend and going on to wherever, and I got to going with him. And I love to dance, Jackie. I mean, you know, I could just dance all night to music. I could today if I was able to. And got to going with Jesse, and I don't know that I was in love with him, but I loved him more as a friend, I think. And he wanted to get married, wanted me to marry him, and and I knew his folks was pretty well off. He and his daddy were big cattle buyers. And so he told me that, you know, we have a lady that lives in our home with my mother, and there will be some times when we will be gone overnight, but I'll have someone will be living with us. And of course, he told me, you know, we can travel and this and so on. But somehow the other, it just didn't bing me, you know. And then Raymond began to come back in the picture, and my brother kept bringing them together. And I had an apartment then. Martha Kennedy, her husband was in the Air Force, and he was seldom home. And Martha had a big 2-story house. She rented the upstairs to the nurses. And I rented a small apartment there. And then from my room into it was a bathroom, which she and the girls and I shared, and it was just like home, you know. She was just like my mother. In fact, that picture that we have in there, Martha made that dress for me. So anyway, Jesse was Catholic, which I couldn't go along with that. And then I'm not proud to tell this, but I had to do it. I told him that I would marry him because I just didn't feel like I could. But you know, after he left, I wasn't sure. And I feel like marriage is the one time. And I knew if I saw Jesse again, which here I have been pulling both ways. And so I told Raymond that I would marry him, and this is not very nice. But then after Raymond went home, and then I got back to dancing with him, and just so much fun, I didn't know. I was pulled, and I just didn't know what to do. And I don't know how, but I told Raymond I can't do it now, which I know I hurt him bad. I didn't know it, but his mother wrote a letter to my mother, which I never saw, and Mama just told me that she had a letter from his mother. And I never questioned, I don't know why, what it was. But I made the decision that Raymond Goldsmith's the one. He's got to be the one I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. So I contacted him and told him this story, and he came down and had a short time. We had a pretty quick marriage. And I didn't do Jesse right. He didn't know enough about it because I had taken 2 weeks off from my job. Actually, I had quit. But my friends did not know that I was going to go home and get married to my folks. And Raymond and his parents came down, and we got married, and it was the way I was supposed to be.
Yeah.
But I had to be sure, because I think when 2 people get married, it's not for, well, we'll see if it works or not. And
Let me untangle you here, because I don't want you to get tangled up in this cord. And
Well,
you'll
you've
do-
been married how long now?
And I tell you what,
67 years I've been married.
let me just move this for a second. I'm going to move this cord kind of away, because I notice you gesture a lot with that hand.
I talk with my hands.
So,
yes.
oh, it's okay. I'm just protecting it. You can do what you want to, and it won't affect it.
Okay.
So you come up to Kansas right away. So what are you thinking when you show up in Kansas?
Well, I'll tell you, the first thing was, it took so long to get here.
Uh-huh.
The roads were just awful then. And Raymond had talked to me about furniture. What do you want to do? You want to wait till you come there and we'll go buy some furniture for this house he had rented. Really nice
Uh-huh.
country home. And I didn't know anything about furniture. And he had saved money from the service. And I said, well, could your mother help you just kind of get the part of the house furnished? He said, yeah. So they did, and back then they took Olson rugs. I imagine y'all have heard of it. But you sent in, and Mom had done that before Mom Goldsmith, sent in your wool clothes, and she made us, it probably was about a 10-foot square, I expect, the most beautiful wool rug you ever saw. I don't know what's happened to it, but it was blues and all pretty colors in it. And so anyway, we got to Kansas about 2 o'clock in the morning, and they were supposed to have a heat on the door open. We got in, it was a mud road, and we got to that house at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we couldn't get in. So his folks lived just down the road and up around the corner and up on the hill, and that's where we headed, and went there to their home. And I'll never forget, they had about 3 bedrooms or 4 upstairs, and of course we slept in Raymond's bed that night, and it squeaked, and you just lay there like this, because their bedroom was right across from you, when you're young and blah blah blah.
Self-conscious.
And anyway, so next day, we were taken down to our new home, and there wasn't any running water, no bathroom. And I don't suppose Raymond ever thought anything about it, because that's the way they lived here. And
Was it a surprise to you?
yeah, it was. But the poor guy, he built me some cabinets, and he put in a pump in the well there eventually, and we got that to water into the house. And he built the cabinets that's in that basement down there.
Huh.
And he put 5-gallon buckets under each one of them, and we'd let them fill up until it was right on the level. And then he carried them out and dumped them.
Oh.
And we had an outside toilet.
Just to get a different camera angle, I'm going to move the camera for just a minute here. I'm going to set it right over here for you.
Is that
And
enough?
get a little different.
Have you had enough?
No, not at all. I want you to keep, in a minute, keep talking. I'm going to move it. I just want to get a little different camera angle here, so we'll have something just a little bit different. I'm going to stop it. Cabinets.
Yep, built nice cabinets, and we have them in the basement now. It was in a different life than I'd lived. I was around people all my life and living in the city, and it was an isolated place, and that's not real favorable for Raymond, but his folks was right up around the corner, and he spent a lot of time with his folks.
Mm-hmm.
And although I'm still happy, it's so good to take me, back to my folks.
Mm-hmm.
And my folks came and so on, and it was a different life. I didn't know what in the world I'd done. I read a lot
Uh-huh.
there, and Mr. and Mrs. Henry Burns, had been a state senator, and he Goldsmith had farmed their ground, and that by then he was postmaster, and he liked us, and young couple, and we were in that 1951 flood in that house that we lived in where we first were married.
Mm-hmm.
Evidently, they had built that house up high enough, because possibly it had been flooded before. But Buck and Helen and the two kids were there.
Mm-hmm.
And that night, Ross and Caroline and Tom and Dorothy, good friends, Gray, invited them for supper, and we played pitch. I guess we played practically all night long. Because when we played, we ate and we played, and so one of the guys went up outside to go to the bathroom, and there was water everywhere. And they had finally receded some, and Tom and Dorothy, I said, we're going to fix breakfast. I'm going to fix breakfast for everybody. Why don't you wait? And Dorothy said, I think we probably better go home. I think the oldest girl stayed home, which was a good thing they did. So while Helen and I fixed breakfast, Buck and Raymond decided maybe they ought to go ahead and take the cars out now, because the water was very deep, and take it up to his folks. And so they done that, and they got back, and it started raining again. And it rained, and it rained, and it rained. And we had chickens that were ready to dress almost. We had hens, and they went out in the dark, in the still night, and took those chickens out of the fryers out of their house and put them in where the hens had a chicken roost. Well, they just tossed them in there, and the dummies didn't even know what a roost was, of course. So they just sat there and drowned 100 of them. And then they was out the barn, I think it was getting daylight then, and we had fat hogs, and they were just starting to go over the fence.
Mm-hmm.
And Raymond would go in and get them by the ear and drag them back, and finally got them all in the barn, just to close them in there. And so Buck, Raymond, of course, when you're young, you don't have fear of things, and we never thought about the water getting in the house, because it was that high up off the ground. I don't know. I moved my arm, didn't I? And I remember so well. Raymond had worked so hard, and Buck had helped him, and come in the house, and probably at, I don't know what time, and Buck said, Raymond, we've got to move this refrigerator and this stuff upstairs. He said, this water's going to get in the house. And Raymond said, you know what, I don't care if it gets in the house, what it does. He said, I can't move another inch. He said, I'm going to go in there, and I'm going to lay down the drain, and I'm going to rest. And Buck was out with a flashlight at night trying to flag a train flying over. Poor guy, he was so worried. Of course, they had 2 children there.
Yeah.
But we could always go upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway.
This is that 2-story house over close to Linden, right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I guess Mr. Burns.
Well, they come and took us out in the boat.
Well, yeah. After the water receded some, a couple of young men came and
In a boat.
in a boat, and the men could walk. It was about this high on them. And Helen and I and the kids were in the boat, and they pushed us, got us out of there. And then that night we went to spent the night in Ross and Caroline's house, and they lived up here on the Melbourne corner. And I never will forget, we was sleeping on the floor, and Jeanette was always such a little spoiled poot, and so aggressive and so on. And said, "Mama, Mama," she said, "my hands keep itching. And they're dry. My hands are so dry." And Helen said, "Well, spit in them." I never will hear her say that. Helen said, "Spit in them." And we're laying on the floor, trying to sleep. But anyway, next day we got to come home and we had a mess to clean up. But sometime we got through all that part of it, and done what had to be done. And then Mr. Burns came to Raymond, and he said, "There's 80 acres up by Linden." And he said, "I kind of like to buy it." But he said, "I'm not going to. Would you and Ann move up there and farm it for me?" And Raymond said, "Yes." So we moved to there up where you've been there. Mm-hmm. And we moved there, and and then we had the opportunity, I believe that was next, to buy this place. And meanwhile, we ended up, Mr. Burns sold that one to us, really reasonable. I mean, he just wanted to help us. And
what was through all these years, what's been your favorite part of the farm life and building your business and all this? What's been your favorite part of all of this, or your favorite things?
Well, I'll tell you, there were several things. And I think probably the most important thing was I had never known what gardening was. I never knew what doing anything in a yard. Uh-huh. And I had to do something. And so after we moved here, I started kind of fooling around with a garden. And I loved it. Oh. And one thing led to another, and then I learned to can. And then this place was so overgrown when we bought it. It was too bad we didn't take a picture of it. It had huge trees all around it. There were those elm trees, which eventually that Dutch elm died, killed them. But I landscaped this place myself. Uh-huh. And it was just something that was in me that I wanted to do.
Did it surprise you when you came here and you came to this, really a whole new country almost, and a whole different environment? Did it surprise you, your independence, that your ability to survive and thrive? And
I really never thought much about it, but that's exactly what it was. It was such a change for me. And Raymond's folks were, well, his mother was a wonderful woman, who I'm sorry to say I never got to know her. Mm-hmm. And until about 3 years before she died. But I was jealous of her because Raymond put her before me. And so, not that I ever said very much about it, but I'm not a jealous woman, be jealous, but, I wanted to be first with him. Yeah. But his mama had always he'd been the one that she looked after more, I think, loved than the other boys, maybe, or maybe he needed their love or what. But
what did you living this way? A lot of people. What did you learn about? Maybe some people look from the outside and think, "Man, that farming thing must be great. You work about 6 months a year and you just party for the other 6 and relax." Anybody who thought, did you find out it's a pretty tough life, what y'all have done and built?
Yeah, I guess so. I think the biggest thing was I was lonesome for people, and I had said to Raymond, "I miss people." I said, "I need people," and he said, "I don't need people." And Gerald told me that too. He said he didn't need people. I said, "Well, I do," and I don't know how
How'd you solve that? Was it by socializing with people?
It was, exactly. Eileen and I, my sister-in-law, and I started bowling at Osage City. And then I began to, make friends. Uh-huh. And it turned out that I was a pretty good bowler. Uh-huh. And bowling was a pretty popular thing along in there. And there were 10 stockholders built a bowling alley in Linden.
Uh-huh.
The doctors and lawyers, actually. And so got it to going, a real nice little 10 lanes. And they came to me and asked me if they sent me to school to teach bowling, would I be interested? And they'd pay for all of it.
Wow.
And I said, oh gosh, I never thought about doing anything like that. And well, we'll send you and the little manager, and we'll send you down to Newton, and it'll be an overnight deal. You'll have 2 days of classes and learning. And I said, I don't know, I'll have to talk to Raymond about it. So I talked to Raymond, and I said, I wouldn't mind doing this, but I said, look, it'll look very good, me going with him. And I said, it was always, what would people think? That would seem to be the theory here. Whatever you do, what would the people think? And so I said to him, well, you could go down there with us, couldn't you? He said, Anna, I can. I've got a farm. But he said, I think you ought to go. And I said, yeah, but I'm going to spend in a motel down there by myself. And I said, what will they think about me going off? I didn't even like the guy, never even talked to him very much. And he said, that's foolish. He said, I want you to go. And I said, I don't know, I want you to go along so bad. And so I went, we left. And we had our class that day. And we were sitting in a place eating. And Raymond showed up. I was never so glad to see anybody in my life. I was just so glad to see him.
Oh, yeah.
I spent the night there in the motel, and then I guess he spent the day. I don't even remember now how it was, because we got our certificates the next day. We passed and so on.
Yeah.
And then they wanted me to teach bowling, and I did in the Linden School, which got me invited to meet women then. And I had 3 schools, Linden, Melbourne, and Quinamo. And I can't remember what grade kids were. Once a week, those kids for PE got to come there, imagine. Mm-hmm. And I loved the children. I just loved to work with them. And so anyway, then it got to where I expanded it to the adult classes. And they were men, all men at night, and was lawyers and doctors and farmers. I could talk people into things, I just tell me how important it was. And Charlie Woodruff was an old bachelor, and if you ever say anything to him, he just go like that and laugh, And I know opened up a life a lot of people, those men that came in there. And I taught them bowling. I had a machine that I worked with, and also had a uniform. I wore a skirt, and I wish I'd taken a picture of me in that. I had a blue skirt that matched the thing and so on. And I done that, and then I began to meet people, women, get acquainted with them. And like Keith, Elizabeth Miller, she worked in the dress shop. And then
Stop it for a minute while go ahead.
So the people that I had begun to get acquainted with were if there's an upper class maybe of people. Mm-hmm. There were people that were respectful, and most of them were, like Marion Burns was her attorney, and I don't know, it just happened to be that a lot of those people that were bowling there and women got acquainted with, and they liked me, and first one thing, and the banker was a woman, Smitty Morris, and there was a little clique of a club, and we were invited to their parties and so on. And the understanding was these were a group of couples that I had said to Elizabeth once, these are all such decent people that I've met. The men are not interested in anyone else's wife. I said, and I see people that wants to join this club. I said, I think it's a kind of a little clique in it. And she said, you bet it is. She said, "Now does everybody get to join this group of people?" And so that was how we got acquainted. And there were several couples. We played pinochle, and we also danced, and we had cocktails, but nobody was inebriated. Only one woman that was ever inebriated. I never, and I think probably she and her husband had drank some, but Dorothy and Cravens and Cliff had moved. They had Skelly Station, and they had moved to Ottawa. And Dorothy had a new bedspread, and Evelyn drank enough to get sick and went in and threw up on Dorothy's bedspread. I never will forget it. God, I shouldn't have that on tape.
Tell me about, art painting's been a part of your life. Tell
One
me
of
how
those,
that all
one of those
started.
women, Betty Herman. Well, she would see me sketching sometime, and she said, "Ann, you ought to." She said, "I took one of those courses through the mail," and she said, "You ought to do that." And I said, "Oh, I don't know. I don't think I have time to fool with it, Betty." And I don't know how I kind of got started. And we had moved down here, and I said, "Well, I wouldn't even know how to start." She said, "I'll take you to Topeka and kind of get you started what you need," and she did. And I would get my stuff out and get him breakfast and get him off to work, and then I'd try to paint some on the table. But by the time I get started, it was time to start dinner again, and I flew back and forth with it, and I don't remember how. I just kept going with it when I could. And
What did it mean to you? What's your painting meant to you through the years? What's it been for you?
well, I think surprise and creation.
Yeah.
Then I could create that, and my love of doing it, and trying to learn. I bought books and studied perspective and different things, and
Was there sort of a validation or satisfaction when you actually realized people will buy my paintings?
yes, it was. That is just almost like a compliment.
Yeah.
And in fact, here the other day, actually, I was become well known, pretty well known over the country. Our banker then wrote a big article about how fortunate we were to have such a talented person
Oh, neat.
in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I think I probably have that somewhere. That's where Clyde Marion bought the bank.
Something for a second. I'm sorry, Uncle Ray. My fault. Let me just get here and see where my battery is right quick. And I didn't mean to stop you. Yeah, okay. Go right ahead. Keep right on going.
Anyway, just to give you an example, Leon was adjusting the lights there on the fireplace. And he said, "Ann, that's a pretty picture." And I said, "You just gave me a gift." And he looked at me and I said, "I don't hear that much anymore." And I meant that. But people that liked my paintings and they came here after, I had to close the shop. I had a shop in Linden.
Yeah, you
Bill
did.
and Goldie Adams.
Uh-huh.
And something I wanted to do. And so they were to do their arts, their crafts and things, and I would do the painting, and we had rented this store. And what I'd do at night, I would do some crafts, and then I could go. There was a Woolworths in Ottawa, and I found out back in there things they were moving. I would find some beautiful pillows. I could buy them for $1 with eyelets, things on them, and I bought things like that and took them in there, and for $1, and I'd sell them for $3.
Yeah.
That took care of our rent, and most of our rent and our, lights and so on. And we were doing fine, and I worked there, put a lot of hours in, and I was doing a lot of painting. at night when I'd come home, and we had gone then. The deal was that we would close on Christmas Eve night, and then we'd head to Texas. So when we come back, I had found out those the things on your stove, you know, the crockery you put all your knives and stuff in, and your whatever. Crocs, thank you. And I found, boy, those are good sellers. And so we stopped in Marshall, Texas, had a fifth of it, and loaded her up. And we had it that we would open up in April when we come back from Texas. We closed on Christmas Eve night, and I wasn't real friendly with those folks, you know. Never talked to them all winter. And so I got home and I called Bill and I said, well, Bill, no, I called from Texas. Are we going to be ready to open in April? And he said, Ann, he said, I'm sick, I'm out of it. And I said, what do you mean? Well, he said, I have something wrong with my throat. And he'd done a lot of that jute stuff. And he said, the doctor said, absolutely don't do that anymore. And he ended up with cancer in the throat. And so here I am. And we divided and settled up real great. And I had thought, well, what I'll do is there'll be women that their kids are in school and they'd like to have a little extra money, and they'll just help me out maybe a couple days a week. Will give me a break. Of course, had Saturday and Sunday, I could always work them. No, not Saturdays, but you know, women would come. Yeah, they'd like to work, but they would want to bring their child. And I said, no, that won't work. You know, we had a lot of, and I had some fancy stuff in there that could be broken and so on. And but anyway, the first thing I told him, I want someone here to work and help me, but the first thing you've got to learn, when somebody comes in my door, you speak to them, and you say, hello, and how are you? And whatever they say, and then you say if there's anything that you'd like to know or ask about, just look around, but don't follow them around. But you're going to be courteous to them. That was one of the bad things I found in Kansas. You go in a store and nobody even look at you and talk to you. And there were several women that wanted to, but they had children, and they wanted to bring their children in. I said, can't do it. I'm not going to have a babysitter job in there. And so anyway, I said to Raymond, well, golly, I'm going to see what I can do. So I painted those Crocs that had the money in them. And I would paint pictures on them at night. And I'd get up early in the morning, and he would fix my breakfast. And those you had every 15-minute increments, you had to spray them. And so he would be doing that while I'm showering, getting ready. And this went on for about so long. And finally, I was just worn out. I was sewing pillows at night, and because I just, you know, wanted to be able to take care of expenses and everything. And you know, paintings are not just, people are just not running in to give $150 for a painting. But I think about everybody in Osage County is my paintings.
Oh, sure.
And a lot of them, yeah, I have Illinois and some in England, sent for gifts, bought there for gifts. In New York, gal that was has sewing. Her sister folks lived here. She called her place the Roadrunner, and I paid her Roadrunner, just stuff like that. But it got to where Raymond made he made a deal so that he could hook up behind the tractors and pull the thing and have transportation, because I was always helping him move from field to field. And Anyway, one day I said, "Oh, listen, I can't go anymore." I said, I wanted this to be a fun thing, and it's not anymore. And the girls next door was our neighbor up here, and another guy was going to put in a beauty shop. And mine was originally a beauty shop. It was everything was there, for hookups. And the girls said to me, "Ann, we're going to put a beauty shop in next door. Would you charge?" Because the same guy on both buildings. And I said, "Well, I'm not going to do that. I got a place all set up, and me unload all this and move in there." I said, "No, I'm sorry, girls can't do that." So the fella next door to me on the south was a carpenter, well known and everything, and he had decided he was going to have an auction. And I said, "Raymond, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a sale." And so I went in and I told those girls a week before, I said, "I'm going to tell you something, but you can't tell it. But you just got your paint ready to paint in here, and you can have this building, because I'm going to quit. But I said, if you tell anyone, nobody will buy anything. They'll be waiting." So they promised they wouldn't. And so I didn't have any idea it turned out like it did. I didn't even have anybody to help me. Right. I opened the door. I'd advertised in the paper. Opened the door at 7 o'clock, and here they were.
That's good.
Now, I had 50% marked off very clearly in the paper of all, because I had a lot of crap stuff. 50% off everything except the paintings. And they came in and they go, "I want this painting 50%. No. Look at the ad. I didn't have it that way."
Right.
"Oh, yeah, it is. You're right." Well, anyway, I tell you, I come out smelling like a rose. And really walked away from there with not owing anything and maybe a few bucks in my pocket or something, but a lifetime experience of dealing with people. I found out that I was always honest with people. I didn't force anything on them, but I could talk to them. I was pretty good with the public.
How would you, been in Kansas so much, just looking back on your life in general, if you were grading your life on a scale of 1 to 10, as far as how it has turned out, how would you, what grade would you give it?
Well, I'll tell you, Jack, I guess I just about have to go 100.
Okay.
Because I've been so happy here. After we made friends, and wonderful friends, good people, and probably gave me a little bit more class than what I'd grown up with. And I had a good husband.
You'd give him a good grade?
Yeah, I would. He there were things that he might have, we could have done different, but yeah, I would. I don't know of anything that I could say that I would have changed. He's not a lover. He was never a hugger, and we grew up with hugging. You know how we always done.
Yeah.
And Raymond's folks never done that. And I miss that. I figured when he would come home, is this going to go on there?
Yeah, I'll edit stuff or whatever.
I figured that what was going to happen when you get married and your husband comes home, he's going to try to eat you up, hug you and all this. That was not Raymond. He was shy, kind of shy, but anyway, I was the one that was the hugger.
Yeah.
But good people.
You've had great neighbors too.
Wonderful neighbors. Good neighbors and good friends. And the old saying, you have to be a good neighbor to have a good neighbor. Mm-hmm. And I think that, and look what we have now here. We're so fortunate to have wonderful neighbors. I had wonderful in-laws and brothers, Mm-hmm. And so I wouldn't have changed it. I know I made the right choice. My life would have been entirely different, and I don't think I would have. I could never have been a Catholic. You have to be Catholic. Yeah. And so I don't even. I know I made the right choice, Jack.
Anything else I need to know that I haven't asked? Anything else you think of?
I don't think so. I think one of the biggest things that was might not heaven to me is when you and your parents came. You know, I worshipped your daddy. It seemed like when he went to Marine Corps, and I'm telling you before, he was a person that was so conscientious of things. He worried about me and I was, you know. And so I always looked up to him. And I just worshipped him, and then it just carried on into your children. And of course, you were the little hippie, funny one too, and where James Norman was more, you know, different personality, and you were the one that I don't know how to say it. It's not that I loved you more than James Norman, but it was just your personality that you've taken your daddy's place with me, and you're so much like your daddy. You know, seriousness and you, of course, and your mother too. She was my sister. So no, I wouldn't change anything. I learned to get along with the cold weather, but we had a good life, really.
We had our camping years. We had a lot of
Oh my, yes.
times. when we-
Oh, I should tell you that story.
Sure, do it.
Ross and Caroline Gray, Raymond and Ross
Hold
were.
on one sec. Let me take a bathroom break.